Hi everyone, welcome to Prairie Adventures. I'm Marty Drutt with the Interpretive Program based in beautiful Police Point Park. We're managed by Grasslands Naturalists and we bring you quality programming all year long. Prairie surrounds us and is incredibly diverse. Large expanses of broad grasslands interspersed with wetlands and pockets of forest. There's so much to see and enjoy on our prairie. But sometimes we take our prairie for granted. Even the simplest thing, the smallest thing, they're living together and they're a key to the maintenance of a healthy prairie ecosystem. And there are also lots of relationships between plants and animals in nature. Sometimes they're closely linked and can be easily missed by us. On this episode, our presenters will focus on our amazing prairie and will include some of our awesome summer staff and even our chief park interpreter. Forest on the prairies? Yes, it does exist. Historically though, they were probably relatively small in size and likely rare. Forces like fire, bison, beaver, and the dry conditions that we have in our area probably confine the trees to river valleys and creek bottoms. We are fortunate here in Medicine Hat, though, to have a very nice natural prairie forest along the South Saskatchewan River right here in Police Point Park. Our prairie forest is dominated by one species. Mike is going to tell us more about this amazing tree.
Hi everyone, my name is Mike Gursky and I'm a summer student interpreter here at Police Point Park. And today we're going to take a closer look at one of the things that makes Police Point Park such an interesting and significant place in Medicine Hat, and that is its abundance of these cottonwood trees. So around this time of year, you can probably see a lot of little cotton balls flying through the air. If you look closer at them, you'll see a little tiny speck inside, and that tiny speck is actually a seed. And around this area, that seed probably comes from a plains cottonwood tree. Now, when most people see these little cotton balls flying through the air, they'll associate them with their allergic reactions. But what you don't realize is that even though these are flying through the air at the same time you might have a runny nose or something, your allergies are probably coming from grass pollen or some other invisible pollen flying through the air. So the plains cottonwood tree is native to the prairie river valleys found in southern Alberta. And we have a great example of one running right through Medicine Hat with the South Saskatchewan River. It's got really low mud flats and really high impressive cliffs to it. Now, cottonwood trees typically spread their seeds in the early summer flooding season because that's when the river levels will rise due to the summer runoff or the spring runoff. And in order to germinate, these little seeds need to find freshly flooded mud or sand or gravel and some place that's not covered in lots of plants and weeds or any other kind of things to compete with, because the trees themselves, when they're just getting started, they're not very good at competing with other types of plants or weeds or anything like that. So because they need this access to water and a fresh, clear place, once they do start growing, the roots will dig down deep and they'll grow deep roots very rapidly because the area could dry up and they need to stay in touch with the water levels in order to grow. So if the seeds are left to germinate and they get lots of exposure to sun and water, they'll actually be able to grow to 150 years old at least. Some of the trees we have here in Police Point Park are estimated to be anywhere from 250 to 300 years old. And in fact, if you take a walk through the park, you'll notice that some of our larger and older cottonwood trees have a lot of interesting features to them. You might notice that some of them are actually broken off in the middle and they have lots of new branches and new growth sprouting from it. You also might notice that some of them are completely hollow inside and some of them have just collapsed. Now, this hollowing out and collapsing is most likely due to a disease that can be found in trees called heart rot. And that's when a fungi gets in there and actually consumes all the heartwood inside the tree and just leaves the outer rings and some of the bark. Now, luckily, these plains cottonwoods are quite resilient, and after the heartwood is gone, it can continue sprouting new growth, and that is due to the tree's circulatory system actually being located just on the outside underneath the bark. So even though it might look like some of these trees are in rough shape, they can actually handle the heart rot and live quite a long time with a hollow inside. So cottonwood forests are extremely valuable to a number of different species for a number of reasons. So migrating birds, for example, will use the forest as rest stops along their journey. Some mammals, such as livestock, will use them as a great place to graze, and they'll use them for shade, or in the winter it's where they build their homes because these trees offer them a great amount of camouflage. And of course, due to the proximity to water sources, the animals also know that if they're in the forest, that water won't be very far away. So the roots of the trees actually can help stabilize the riverbanks where they grow and protect from erosion. And not only that, but the organic matter, such as the falling leaves, will help regulate some of the water runoff and prevent flooding. Now, on the floor of the forest, beneath the canopy, is a lot of diversity as well. A lot of weeds and shrubs, and even things you wouldn't expect, like Saskatoon berries, can grow here. The key point is that without these forests, none of this stuff would be able to live or thrive the way it does, and there'd be a lot more damage from things like erosion and flooding in the area. So it's important to recognize that the number of healthy cottonwood forests is actually declining, and this can be due to a few things. It's been shown that the damming of some rivers has had a negative effect on downstream cottonwood forests. There is also some issues related to overgrazing or land development. But luckily, these trees are resilient, and if they're given a few years of rest, if these forests are given enough time to rest so there's no grazing on them or any kind of urban development, they'll actually be able to regenerate themselves. And people need cottonwood forests too. People come down to Police Point Park for a number of reasons. They come down to walk, they come down to fish a little bit, or ride their bikes along the trail. Kids come down here to learn about nature. Artists come down here to find inspiration. And photographers love it down here because it offers such a unique setting right in the middle of the prairies. So you never know what you're going to find here, and it's always a little bit different.
Many of you know the monarch butterfly, either through personal observation or from a picture. Some years we have lots of monarchs in our area, and other years not so many, and that's fairly normal for this species. But what you may not know about monarchs is its dependence on a very specific native wildflower with a somewhat deceptive name. Megan is going to give us more details about this relationship.
Thank you, Marty. Hi, my name is Megan, and I am a summer student working at Police Point Park. Today, I will be talking to you of one of our native wildflowers, the milkweed, and its companion, the monarch. So today, we are here on Parkview Drive Hill, where, as you can see behind me, there's a huge patch of milkweed that has just begun to bloom. Many of you may have recognized this plant already, and some of you may have even associated a negative bias towards it. In reality, these plants are an essential part of one of our infamous butterflies' life, the monarch. To start off, I just want to clear up some misconceptions many people may have about the milkweed plant. Many people believe that because the sap is toxic, that if you, your animals, or your livestock consume the slightest amount, you may become ill or die. Now, it is true that this sap is slightly toxic, but it only causes harm if it is consumed in a large enough amount. Luckily for us, the sap has a very bitter taste, so we don't usually go out of our way to try and consume a large amount of it. As for our animals or our cows, they tend to avoid this as much as they can as well because of this bitter taste. Another misconception many people may have is that milkweed is an invasive species. This stems from the fact that milkweed possess similar characteristics as noxious weeds. Milkweed is able to reproduce quicker than most wildflowers here in Alberta. This is because it reproduces vegetatively, which allows it to grow quickly and expand its population past where it originated. Unfortunately, because of these myths, Many people avoid planting the milkweed or they kill the plant. In reality, this takes away the homes and the food of one of our most beautiful butterflies, the monarch. Now, the milkweed can actually be referred to as the monarch flower, and this is because they are solely dependent on the milkweed throughout their life. They begin and end their life on the milkweed. The female monarch butterfly flies in, lays her eggs underneath the milkweed leaves, and as soon as the eggs hatch, the monarch caterpillars immediately begin to feast on the milkweed. They begin to consume this toxic, bitter sap, and that taste stays with them throughout their caterpillar stage as well as their adult lives. This is one of the main defense mechanisms for the monarch butterfly and for the monarch caterpillar. This means if a predator, like a bird, swoops in and tries to eat the caterpillar or the butterfly, they will experience an extremely bitter taste in their mouths. The monarch butterfly does its best to warn the potential predators that it has a bitter taste by its bright orange colors. Many species do this to warn predators that they taste bad or that they are poisonous. In the monarch's case, they hope that this warns predators that they don't need to waste their time trying to eat them because they don't taste very good. In the end, we should realize that there are many dependent relationships in nature, such as the milkweed and the monarch butterfly. Without the milkweed, we aren't able to experience the beauty of monarchs.
Our grasslands are blessed to have so many bright, beautiful wildflowers. Some of them are very well known to you. Others, they may be a bit more unexpected. Many of these small flowering plants generally go unnoticed through most of the year until they produce their bright, beautiful, showy blooms. Corlaine is going to take us to a couple of locations to find wildflowers and tell us more.
Thanks, Marty. I'm Corlaine Gardner, and right now I'm out in Police Point Park enjoying the fragrance of a beautiful flower. It's probably one of the most recognizable wildflowers around here. I think most Albertans will recognize the wild rose. After all, it is our provincial flower. But did you know there's several different species of wild roses? Out on the open prairie, you get the prairie rose, and they're only about this tall. They still have a full-size blossom on them, just like these ones, but they will grow on the dry hillsides, and they're often a really vivid pink. But they aren't always just an even color. Sometimes I've seen ones that are almost striped or mottled with a softer pink blended in. They're really pretty, and as I say, they're just little guys scattered across the hillsides in amongst the other wildflowers. So keep your eyes open for them. Around me here are the prickly roses. Obviously, they're a lot taller. They often will grow in situations like this, in amongst other shrubs, at the edge of a clump of trees. And so you'll find these as you hike the trails through our coulees and along the moister areas. They need a little bit more moisture, and they're not quite as tough as those little roses out on the hillsides. So we've got the two kinds that are quite common around here, and I really encourage you to get out and smell the roses. There's another flower that I'd like to show you, and it's blooming up by the Family Leisure Center. So let's go up there. Here I am in this beautiful little patch of prairie behind the Family Leisure Center. This is really a little hidden gem to have such a wild piece of land right within the city. Students from Crescent Heights High School often use this as an outdoor study area. How many schools have a good prairie ecosystem within a couple minutes walk from school? They're very fortunate. And it happens to be one of the best places to come and find the prickly pear cactus. Here in southern Alberta, we tend to take cactus for granted, but this is one of the few places all across Canada where cactuses can survive. And not only do we have one kind of cactus, but we have three. Now, the best known is, of course, the prickly pear cactus with its big, beautiful blossoms, big flat pads, which are its adapted leaves. And they are out across the hillsides in little sheltered prairie patches like this. You might see them out on pasture land, especially if it's been grazed quite short. You'll see the clumps of cactus. They're kind of like little tiny ecosystems right there. When they're blooming, they attract all sorts of pollinators. And if there's bugs to eat, then there's going to be predators wanting to eat the bugs. And if they're sheltering some other plants with their thorns, then there's space for other animals to hide and to feed. So these cactuses can be a really important part of our prairies. That's the one kind of cactus. There's another one. It's also a close relative of the prickly pear, and it's called the brittle prickly pear. It kind of looks like an undernourished young prickly pear cactus, but if you look closely, you can tell the difference. Now these big ones have very flat pads, kind of like your hand. They're very flat back to front, whereas the brittle prickly pear has rounder pads. It's more like your thumb. If you did a cross-section of your thumb, it would be round. If you did a cross-section of your hand, it would be flat. So look carefully if you see a little prickly pear. You might be checking out the second kind of cactus that we have. It also has a big, beautiful yellow blossom, very similar to these ones. Then there's the third cactus, which is the pincushion cactus. Now, it blooms a little bit later, and until it blooms, you'd kind of think it was shy. It hides in the grass, just sticking out of the ground, looking like a little pincushion with all those thorns on it. But then when it blooms, this gorgeous, deep pink fuchsia blossom just pops right out. Really, it's like finding a jewel in the grass. It's hardly inconspicuous when it's in bloom. After the bloom, it creates a little berry. Now, the other cactuses create a fruit too, which some people like. I've never really developed a taste for. The pincushion though, that little berry is very much like a gooseberry. And some people even will gather it and make jelly. I've heard some stories about how interesting it is to try and deal with making jelly, but even just picking one and sampling it later in the summer is fun. 3 kinds of cactus, one of the few places in Canada where you can find that. And I hope that you will take time to get out and enjoy the wildflowers that we have. Our late spring, early summer flowers are only here for a few weeks, so do get out and enjoy them. Back to you, Marty.
On this episode of Prairie Adventures, our presenters have focused on some of our wonderful wildflowers. But as you know, our prairie is very diverse, so there's many more species of wildflowers in our area. But is there a way that you can identify some of these species? Of course there is, thanks to the Grasslands Naturalists. So the Naturalists are the nature club here in Medicine Hat, and they've been in existence for over 30 years. And the Naturalists have a contract with the city to manage the Nature Center and hire and pay the staff. The city provides some funding for the program through the contract, but the Naturalists can supplement that funding with donations and grant money that they can apply for because of their charitable status. Now the Naturalists have their own events, projects, and field trips separate from the interpretive program, and non-members are able to participate. If you want to know more about the Grasslands Naturalists, just visit their website at natureline.info/GN. Now, one of the great things that the Naturalists have completed recently is a field guide to wildflowers of Medicine Hat and the surrounding area. This was a collaborative effort of several members of the group, those with wildflower knowledge, photographers, and some with computer expertise. So let's take a little bit closer look at the guide. So here I am showing the hard copy version of the guide. which is available at the Nature Center. There's also an online version of the guide as well. And if I open up the hard copy version, we look at the photographs. They're pretty nice photographs, but the ones on the website are much better and show more detail. The other thing about the website version is it does have a bit more information than is presented in the hard copy version. And then what about the wildflowers themselves? How are they organized? Well, they're organized by when the flowers appear. So you have 3 categories for that. You have spring, early summer, and late summer flowering. And there are 64 species of wildflower that are featured in the guide. And then on top of that, it also shows some of the common flowering shrubs and trees, some grasses, some sage and sage-like plants, some of the bad invasive plants, and then just a small number of plants that are native but are considered poisonous or might irritate our skin. And then the native plants are further categorized into different habitats where they might occur. So there's 3 of those. One is grasslands, which is represented by a green oval. Another is coulees, which is represented by a brown oval. And the third one is wetlands or riparian areas, which has a blue oval. So I've had some personal experience using the guide, and it came in quite handy. Earlier in the spring, I was getting ready to do some programming on wetlands down in Kincooley, and I was scouting ahead of the program. And lo and behold, I came across a small white flower growing in the riparian area that I recognized, but of course, I did not remember the name of this flower. And so, then I remembered I have the guide with me. So why not take a look in there? It wasn't out that long, so it was pretty new. Take a look in the guide and see if I can figure out what flower it was. So I opened the guide up to the spring flowering pages, which cover April through June. And I was looking for a flower that was blooming in May. And I started looking on those pages. I went across the first row and I was looking for the blue oval next to the flower picture because this flower was growing in the riparian area. And the very first one that I came to that had a blue oval and the right colored flower, the flower was white. There it was. It matched the picture quite nicely. Even some of the leaves matched. And I figured out that it was the starflower Solomon seal. And then I was able to share this information with other groups throughout the spring, and then also present each teacher that came down a copy of the guide to use in the classroom. Recently, we had to move some of the native plants that were located in the brick planters near the Nature Center to other parts of the park. One of these plants may seem like it doesn't belong here, although it does because of its very desert-like appearance. Mallory is ready to tell us more about this plant and the unique way that its flowers are pollinated.
Hi, my name is Mallory. I work here at the Medicine Hat Interpretive Center. I'm here today to talk to you about a plant that we have established here in the park. It is called the yucca plant. There are 40 to 50 different types of yucca plants, but the one I'll be talking to you today about is called the Yucca glauca. The Yucca glauca's common name is called the soapweed yucca. It gets the common name soapweed yucca because of the roots. In the past, the roots have been used for soap and shampoo. Despite having the roots being used for soap and shampoo, the roots produce a toxin called saponin. But the saponin toxin is not harmful to humans, considering our body cannot absorb this toxin if we do consume it. This yucca plant is native to Canada and the United States. It can reach up to 4 feet wide, with a stalk reaching up to 3 feet tall. The dagger-like leaves that form a rosette around the plant gives it its other common name, called the Spanish bayonet. The stalk on the yucca plant produces multiple panicles, which means individual flowers. Typically, the yuccas bloom in spring and late summer, and this coincides with the time where the yucca moths are just starting to emerge from their cocoons. The male and female yucca moth's lifespan is about a year. Once the male and female have mated, the male's life cycle is now over, and the female yucca moth has to prepare to lay her eggs. She will climb into a flower and take all the pollen off the anthers of the plant. And once she's done this, she'll go and search for a new plant to go and put the pollen in. When she finds another flower to put the pollen in, she puts the pollen on the stigma, and then she lays her eggs. Once the eggs hatch, the flower has then produced its seed and fruit, and these new larvae can now eat these seeds and then fall to the ground and then start turning into a cocoon themselves. These caterpillars fall to the ground, and in the wintertime they turn themselves into a cocoon where they wait till the following spring to emerge as a yucca moth. Here at the Medicine Hat Interpretive Center, we have a nice little dedicated patch of yucca plants. But if you'd like to look at a larger patch of these yucca plants, there is a place that is about an hour drive outside of Medicine Hat, and it is called Etzicum. In Etzicum, there's a windmill museum with a large patch of these yucca plants outside. And in the spring and summer, they have known to have these yucca moths. If you are interested in learning more about these yucca plants and the yucca moths and the symbiotic relationship they have with each other, come visit us down at the Medicine Hat Interpretive Center in Police Point Park.
Thanks so much for joining us on Prairie Adventures. As you've seen and heard, our prairie is highly complex and very diverse. Sometimes much maligned as only a wasteland, there are many intricate nuances that can be found on our prairie if one only looks just a little bit closer. We hope this has motivated you to get out and explore some of our local prairie landscapes. If you want to know more about Prairie, please give us a call on the Nature Line at 403-529-6225. Or, even better, come by to the Nature Center and visit us in person. The Nature Center, we are open all year long, Tuesday through Sunday, 9 to 5, and we would definitely love to see you. I'm Marty Drutt for all of our presenters. We hope to hear from you or see you very soon.